data centers in space. Yeah. Now, sort of follow me along this line. Data
Yes, yeah.
centers in space. Yeah. What would be the advantage of a data center in space? Well, these use an awful lot of power. Yeah. And they're very, very, very bad for the environment, for the planet. Do you want to sort of tie in how would they get this power though?
I know how they get that power. So, all right. So the ISS has solar panels to power the ISS, right? No big
Yeah.
deal. Satellites obviously have the same thing. For the next 5 to 10, 15 years, we're going to be putting a lot of companies are going to be on the moon. Lots of companies, lots of things going on outside of just what we are just talking about. So, but what you're saying, power. We're going to need. We're going. There's going to be a need above and beyond just your basic solar panels on your satellite to provide power, especially
Yes,
for
they
something
wouldn't be
like
able to
this.
generate enough for a data center.
Exactly. So why not? And it would be possible to have something similar to a Tesla Powerwall, but yet in space. Let's say on, I don't know, a Pioneer spacecraft that would supply power to something like that and to other things as well, not just that itself. But
So
they're already
basically,
proving
like
that.
a solar farm in space where you can supply power back to the services. So, mate, what do you think?
Very interesting. Very interesting. Outside of maybe Lockheed and a few other obvious companies we probably expect to hear from, I did love the fact that he mentioned hypersonics.
Yeah.
That was huge. That was very huge.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it was one of my major concerns with the relationship. We heard with a question there that Trump didn't answer himself. One of my major concerns was his relationship with Elon Musk and then SpaceX. Would they just hands down get the majority of these deals? But the fact that hypersonics are going to be part of it, it really gets me excited about Haste. We've heard Peter Beck come out and say he is very interested in competing for contracts for the Iron Dome. Another thing I want to address on this as well is Francisco said that the next big electron thing will be responsive space. So Francisco introduced me to a concept called the ACE concept, is it? And what that basically is have no fixed site for responsive missions. So we know the likes of, well, I'm going to mute you for 2 seconds. So we know the likes of the Department of Defense wants very responsive missions to be carried out. So they want the likes of Haste to be able to launch within 24 hours off demand. However, God forbid a war did break out overnight. You don't want the likes of Wallops Island or Launch Complex 1 in New Zealand to be targeted because they know exactly where they're going to be launching these electron missions from. Now, Francisco sort of introduced me to a concept that what about these movable launch pads? And we've heard Beck talk about these movable launch pads before. So then why don't they put them at sea? We know they're talking about Neutron being able to land on a barge. So it's not something they're completely against. We see the Chinese launch rockets from a ship. So why not use this ACE concept if it's going to be for responsive space? Why not have these movable launch pads that you'd be launching these quick responsive missions from? Why would you want them targeting your main launch complexes? That'd be very, very risky in the event of a war. You have 2 complexes, and that'll be it. What are your thoughts on that, Christopher?
That's not a concept I've never really considered. it makes all the sense in the world. It really does. I mean, obviously, we're already going to use barges for launches, or not launches, but landing pads. Using them for launch pads. I mean, if you take the size of the barge they're going to have for Neutron, it'd easily be big enough to launch an electron off of.
Yeah.
So that's not that's not far fetched at all. That's very, very plausible. Very plausible.
And then they said about Canada there, and they said even the likes of Alaska, and we know that, was it Johnny Mack came in and said it, that they have plans for an Alaskan launch. Yeah. So Rocket Lab has lots of plans for Alaskan launches, as mentioned. What's that?
Well, we talked about this a few months ago when we were really ramping up the whole Haste thing, and I think it was Johnny that pointed out that, hey, they've already attempted to launch out of Alaska. I didn't even know they had a launch pad, a facility in Alaska. But you look a bit more into it, and you realize there are some definite advantages of having that location, geographically and militarily, for sure. Infrastructure is mostly already there. There wouldn't take really a lot to upgrade it, for even a neutron launch.
Yeah.
And I know that's even that's going to sound a little crazy to some of us, but that's really not far fetched. I mean, yeah, we're going to start off on the East Coast out of Wallops with neutron, but the odds of neutron just being primarily based in Wallops is ridiculous. It is. Having it in multiple locations, and they're pretty well set up in Colorado. Colorado would not be a bad location. I know Colorado doesn't have a lot of infrastructure for it, but as far as current launch infrastructure, but as far as what Rocket Lab has invested in that area, Alaska again, yeah, Canada. We talked about Canada months ago. We talked about as far as Haste branching out and going to different countries. Canada was a no-brainer to us. It was like, all right, it's right across the border, very easy to get there. Infrastructure, no big deal. And Canada's already been investing in their own launch projects, so that's not surprising at all. Canada's that's a no-brainer.
What got me really excited about that whole concept that Francisco introduced me to was the fact that it makes a lot of sense. So war breaks out. Look, they're going to target your launch pad, yeah? Now, we know Beck has said himself that he's not a fan of building new launch complexes unless they have a complete reason why doing it. So unless there's a reason why, like a demand for them to build another launch complex somewhere else. Whereas if say like they built another launch complex in Colorado, but then instead of having 2 targets, they just have 3 targets. Whereas the likes of these, say, barges or even ships that they could launch off of, I imagine that the infrastructure is so much cheaper than having a fixed launch complex. Now, I understand that maybe you wouldn't be able to launch the likes of in Neutron off of, just because the amount of fuel and everything you'd be carrying, I'd say it'd be high risk. But I wouldn't see why the likes of a Electron couldn't be launched off quick demand off one of these. And you'd be able to put them in the exact location that's perfect for orbital insertion. You wouldn't really have to worry about weather too much because you'd be able to move your launch pad around. It's a concept that really excites me. And I know, like, if you look at it, the Air Force are big into using this when it comes to the likes of cargo planes. So why wouldn't apply the same concept to your rocket launches? It just makes sense. Guys, if you think I'm jumping down the wrong alley, blame Francisco. No, I'm messing. If you think I'm jumping down the wrong alley, completely come in and shoot me down. But to me, it makes sense. To me, that makes sense. To me, the concept you introduced earlier about IonQ and even the likes of data centers, and then having Rocket Lab supply them with power with so-called solar farms, that makes sense to me. Like, why wouldn't they do it? They have the ability to do it. And if you have the ability and the opportunity is there, we know Rocket Lab love opportunity. So why wouldn't they do it? You know, Beck has come out and said it's time to be bold. So why not look for bold statements, bold ideas that we can go for? Unless, instead of just thinking, I think, from my understanding, a lot of Rocket Lab investors are very clued in on, right, what we're going to do. We're going to make a constellation. It's going to be a Starlink-like constellation, and that's what we're going forward. And look, potentially it could be, but I'm just trying to think outside the box. I'm trying to think bigger. You've said yourself, the likes of lunar missions are going to be, in the next 5-10 years, a lot bigger than they are now. And this is what excites me more about some of these lunar missions in comparison to like some Martian missions. We know SpaceX is going to go to Mars. So why not have the likes of your solar farms around the moon be able to supply some of these with the power? We know the solar potential up in space is so much better because there's no atmosphere. So why not go after this? Guys, you're going to think I am completely wild, and you're going to think I am just a headbanger that has come from the eVTOL realm. But I just want to introduce these type of concepts to you. And this is the
No, you're not, bro. You're not crazy. You just been hanging out with me too much. You've been listening to me too much. No, you look. At least in my mind, you're making total sense. And
Yeah.
and it never hurts to think outside the box. Again, it makes it fun, it makes it more interesting. But the thing is about a lot of what you've been saying is that there are a lot of dots to put together, sure, but there's a lot of proof in there that shows that this is all a possible reality. And if and just sit back and ignore it is kind of ignorant, in my opinion.
Yeah, and guys, like, my whole vision of what we want to bring to the Haste Club is, you see there, we have the likes of Chris here giving an awful lot of insight. The contacts he has is absolutely amazing. We like to share the likes of what Chris or what Francisco and ourselves talk about, the likes of what Johnny Mack and ourselves talk about. But guys, there's nothing stopping any of you from reaching out to us. And look, you video on this, or you want us to discuss this on a Haste Club. It could be you want to come on in a Haste Club. Guys, I know eventually I will get it to where my vision is. Ideally, I want it to be where myself and Christopher could be talking here, and next thing we can have the likes of Francisco wants to call in. Francisco has some of his thoughts. Next thing, Olga wants to call in. We have Curtis. Anyone that wants to call in, I'd be so, I don't know. Once I get that side of the project across, I just think this would be very, very exciting. And that's why I don't want it to be a carbon copy of what you guys are used to on the weekend. What the guys do on the weekend is unbelievable. And I don't even want to try and do what they're doing. I don't want to come on here and just report the news, because they do an amazing job on that. All we want to do is be able to build on what they talk about. We want to be able to get the retail investor, the average retail investor, onto the channel to speak their thoughts. Where do they see it going? Because you know what? You might unlock an idea in our heads, and it might fire us down a completely different rabbit hole. Or it could completely instill exactly what we're thinking. But guys, this is the Haste Club. My name's Liam from the Hustle Brothers. This has been Christopher from Haste Club. And look, we're only getting started. So make sure to bang the subscribe and hit the follow on X.
Thanks, everyone.